Hello, everyone, and welcome to the F-1 International Student Maximize Your Training and Employment Benefits session today. My name is Luis Valencia, and I am the Internship and Career Development Program Manager for UC Berkeley Extension / Berkeley Global. It is my pleasure to welcome members of the UC Berkeley Extension's International Student Services team. Today, we have Vanina Grinnell, Director of International Student Services, Olga Pali and Kevin Guzman, who are also on the team as International Student Advisors. Welcome.
So welcome everyone to our workshop today. We're going to be talking about, as an F1 student, how do you maximize your training and your employment benefits while you're studying? So as we introduce ourselves, so my name is Vanina Brunel, and I'm joined by my two colleagues, Olga and Kevin, and we will be talking to you today throughout the presentation. I imagine that you will also have a lot of questions during the presentation. We will allow ample time to allow you to ask all sorts of questions, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of our presentation. So International Student Services. So I know a lot of you, some of you might be students with us already. Some of you might be thinking of being students with us in the future, and some of you may be students in the US at other schools or thinking about going to other schools. If you're thinking about coming or being in the US as an F1 international student, you will have an International Student Services office. It might be called something different, but essentially, so we are the UC Berkeley Extension or UC Berkeley Global International Student Services Office, and ISS advisors all over the United States are here to help you. That's our job. And we're here to help you ensure that you maintain your visa status. So there's a lot of rules to follow, and we'll talk about some of those. We issue you some of your visa documents, and then we usually also collaborate between your academic programs and lots of other offices at your school to make sure you've got a really good experience. So we provide advice on visa, usually health insurance, housing, cultural adjustments, mental health, and so much more. So no matter where you go to school, you will have an office like ours and of trained advisors ready to help you. So F1 students. So we won't be talking today about all of the intricacies of being an F1 student. We're going to focus on employment. But before we get there, we do want to share with you a few basics that are going to serve as the foundation of what we're going to talk about. So being an F1 international student, it's what's called a non-immigrant visa, which means that your long-term plans are not to stay in the United States. The expectation is that you would come to the United States, complete your studies and maybe some employment training, and then return to your home country. And the primary purpose of being an F1 student is to study. Although we will be talking about employment today, we always have to remember that the primary purpose of an F1 visa is not employment, but it is to study and make progress and advance in your academic knowledge and prepare yourselves for your future career. How long does an F1 visa last? How long can you stay in the United States? Well, it really depends on the length of time that you are studying. So that's something, whether you're here studying for 1 semester program, a 2 semester, maybe you're looking and doing a PhD program, maybe you're looking to do a bachelor's, a certificate, then a PhD. So all of that, as long as you are a full-time student, that's how long you can stay. Maintaining your status, that's what we call it, your status, your F1 status is really, really important as an F1 student. So like I mentioned, there's lots and lots of rules to follow when you are an international student in the United States. Some of those include being enrolled full-time, reporting your address, and a lot of other things. So your primary purpose is to study, and your main responsibility as an F1 student is to make sure that you understand all the rules and you're following all the rules so that you can be what's called good status, maintaining your status. If you maintain your status, then you become eligible for benefits. And some of those are employment benefits. So there are employment and training benefits to being an F1 student, which we'll cover today. But keep in mind that they are limited. There are many rules, as I said, around employment, which we'll talk about today. So as we launch into this, what we want to help you understand is all your options and to help you maximize your opportunities, but we want you to do so legally. So here's an overview of all your F1 training opportunities. And there are some available while you are an F1 student, so while you're studying full-time. There are others that apply after you finish being a student, so after you graduate. And then we'll also be talking a little bit about life after being an F1 student, as there are many other types of visas that are not F1 that are more geared toward longer-term employment. So we will go into detail on campus employment, as well as curricular practical training, which you can do while you're studying. We'll also talk a little bit about optional practical training, OPT, which is after you graduate, and then talk about the multitude of visas that might be available to you after you finish. I'll pass it on to my colleague Olga to talk about OnCampus.
Hello, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Very, very happy to see you. Yeah, about OnCampus. If you are holding an F1 status, you're eligible to work on campus. Hours are limited to 20 hours per week when school is in session. And you can work full-time during the school break, let's say spring break, summertime, or during the winter break. On-campus employment ends at the end of your program. But if you, let's say, transfer to another school, then you can start working on campus again at that school. So it doesn't require an authorization, but if you don't have a social security, you would need to get a job offer and will let you apply for the social security number so you can get paid. Curriculum practical training. So this is another type of employment, and this is off-campus employment. It can happen again while you're still enrolled in the program, and it has very strict rules. This type of employment requires CPT authorization. The authorization is done by the school official, so you don't need to apply through the Citizens and Immigration Services, but you must be in F1 status, you must be enrolled, in most cases full-time, and you must maintain a good academic standing. Your job must relate directly to your field of study. And what is most importantly is that you need to have a job offer. So you will need to find the job in the field of your studies, and then you can apply for the CPT authorization. At the UC Berkeley Extension, most common way to obtain a CPT authorization is to apply for the internship program that you've obviously already heard about. For the general information about CPT and other types of employment for F1 students can be found on the Study in the States website, which we highly recommend, especially for the new students to visit. Yeah, and I'll be happy to answer questions in the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Olga. So for those of you joining us today, some of you may have heard of or are interested in applying for optional practical training, or OPT. So allow me to talk briefly about what OPT is and how it works. Optional practical training is temporary work authorization that is granted by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services for students studying in the U.S. on an F-1 student visa. Most importantly, this temporary work authorization permits an international student to gain experience directly related to that student's major field of study. Now, that is to say, an international student cannot study computer science and then drive for Uber while on OPT. The job must be related to the student's field of study. In order to be eligible to apply for OPT, an international student must meet these two criteria. One, the student needs to be enrolled at a full-time at a college or university for at least one academic year. And two, the student needs to have successfully completed a certificate or degree. If a student meets these criteria, then they can meet with their international student advisor and apply for OPT. Lastly, I want to mention that it isn't necessary to have a job offer lined up before applying for OPT. Students may apply for OPT up to 90 days before their program end date without a job offer. However, if the student is granted OPT, then they will need to find employment within 90 days of starting their OPT. While we're on the subject of working in the US, I should also mention some other points to remember. When we talk about working in the US as an international student, it's important to note these key items. To work in the United States, you must have a Social Security number, or SSN. A Social Security number is required if you would like your employer to pay you. As an international student, it isn't enough to simply have a Social Security number. You must be authorized to work, and that is something with which your international student advisor and designated school official can help you. Whether you have secured an on-campus job or you are about to start your OPT, you must first obtain a Social Security number after you have been authorized to work. Also, you must pay taxes on each US dollar you earn. As an international student working on OPT or working part-time on campus, you are liable to file taxes for every year in which you are working in the US. Lastly, it is permissible to volunteer as an F-1 student. However, this does not mean that it is okay to work without pay. In the US, there are strict rules regarding employment for international students, and it's important to remember that there are strict definitions for volunteer work. So working for a company without pay is not volunteering, and doing so could jeopardize your F-1 visa status. Now, some of you might also be wondering about something called a STEM OPT extension. And this is something that is applicable to international students who have completed a degree in a STEM field, by which we mean science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. For eligible students, this would allow for a 24-month extension of their OPT, thereby allowing a student to continue working in the US for a total of 3 years while on OPT. Now, the information that I've provided today is a brief overview of what optional practical training is, and we could dive further into the details of this topic. So I want to let you all know that for current Berkeley Global students, we will be hosting an OPT information session on Thursday, March 25th, or Wednesday, March 31st at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I will now turn it over to Vanina, who will discuss sponsored work visas and life after your F-1 visa.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Thanks so much, Olga. So before I kind of dive into life after F-1, what we've presented today is a very quick overview, right? And the reason for the quick overview and rather than detailed process is that like I mentioned, every single school has an international student office, and every single school will have a different process by which you go to apply for on-campus, for CPT or OPT. The information that we've presented is information that should be consistent across all of the schools in the United States who host F-1 students, but the particulars are going to come from your international student office. And that is why we will absolutely answer your questions after the presentation, but we can only really answer what UC Berkeley Extension or Berkeley Global does as far as our policies for how to apply and things like that. So just wanted to make sure that before we left the world of F1, we were clear as well that wanted to remind you that the primary purpose, right, is to study. And so a lot of what we've presented to you, especially with CPT and OPT, we've mentioned that all work that you're doing has to be related to what you're studying. And the reason for that is that it is called CPT and OPT, which stands for practical training. The US government and its rules do want you to study here and do want you to get practical experience in your field of study so that you can go on and advance in your careers, whether that's in your home country, somewhere else, or in the United States. So after you are kind of done with your F1, so that might be after you graduate, it might be after your OPT, it might be after your STEM extension OPT. There are many, 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 many different types of visas in the United States that allow you to work. The ones here on the screen are just a few. And I will talk a little bit about a couple of them and maybe do a little bit more explaining about the H-1B, which is the most popular one that students ask about the most. But these visas that are listed here allow people to apply for work authorization in the United States by being sponsored by their employer. So for example, the H classification, as well as most of these do require that you get an employer first who is wanting you to remain in the United States to work for them or to come to the United States to work for them. You cannot, for most of these, you cannot apply for them by yourself. There is the exception of maybe the O visa. If you're a Nobel Prize winner or something like that, or someone extraordinary, you can sponsor yourself. But most of these types of visas do require that you obtain an employer who wants to sponsor you. And that's actually different than the F1 work permissions. The F1 work permissions do not require that. And we'll talk about that in a further slide. So the most popular that we get questions about is the H-1B. That is the most common visa that students go to after they complete their F1. And it is primarily for those who are in a specialty occupation. And there is actually a very lengthy discussion and description of what that means. But it does require, it's a position that requires a degree and some form of specialization in that field. So for example, if you were going to go work for Google, you might require you to have a advanced degree in computer science. That's one example. The H-1B also works on a specific timeline for most private companies, in which the process, all applications are due at a specific time of year. So that's usually April 1st. And so what that means is when you get to that point in your F1 and you're thinking about wanting to continue in the United States, you will have to talk to your employer well in advance of finishing your OPT to kind of get through all this sponsorship. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lengthy process. And notably for the H-1B is there's a limited number of them. There's what's called a cap. So all of that changes from year to year. And we do encourage you to do your own research, The link that's presented at the bottom of the screen is a really good one. It's official information. You can find a lot of information out there in the world that may or may not be accurate. But this is something that we always encourage students to go to official sources instead of just searching on the internet, because there's a lot of not so accurate information out there. So just in summary, and we'll be happy to answer more questions, but these are not types of visas that your international student office is going to be experts on. We're only going to be experts about F1s, but there are a lot of different visa types out there that students can advance to if their employer would like to sponsor them. So leading to, how do you talk to a potential employer about being an F1 student? We've already said that there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of planning involved. And one thing that comes up a lot when we speak to students, to F1 students, is how do I explain to a potential employer, whether it's for on-campus, CPT, OPT, H-1B, whatever the case may be, how do I bring this up to an employer? So there's not one right answer. It's a little bit based on your situation and your comfort, but I've gathered a few tips that we've gathered over the years. So the first one is, your status is your responsibility. And what that means is, when you are ready to come to the United States, to start speaking to employers, maybe you go to a career fair, maybe you're in an interview, being able to explain and understand what your work options are, how to get work authorization, what the timing is, what paperwork you need, is not the employer's responsibility. It is yours as an F1 student. Your international student office is absolutely here to help you, and that is going to be your #1 source of information. But note that everything about you going out into the world and presenting yourself as an international student will be your responsibility. So, second tip is, do your research and definitely talk to your DSO. Your DSO is your designated school official. We three are designated school officials. We are the ones managing your F1 status. So please refer to that office. They will have all the answers for you and will be able to help you. Third tip, there are most likely going to be 2 basic questions on almost every single job application. One is, do you have authorization to work? And do you need sponsorship? And usually if it's an online application, you've got 2 options, yes or no. And a lot of students get confused by this because they might be applying to an internship, for example. So an internship might just be for the summer, right? If you're coming for 2 years or 1 year and you're just doing an internship during the summer, do you have authorization to work? Well, because CPT requires that you have a job first, technically when you apply, the answer is no. However, when you start your job, the answer should be yes. So how do you answer that question? It really depends on the type of job, but usually if you know that you are eligible for the type of work that you're applying to, so you've done your research, you've talked to your DSO, you can answer yes to that question, even if you don't currently have work authorization, as long as you know that you will have work authorization at the time that you begin your employment. The second question, do you need sponsorship? Well, that's a little bit more complicated. Taking the same scenario of a summer internship. If your intention is just to work for a couple of months during your summer break, and it's not a long-term job, well, the answer is no, right? You don't need sponsorship. And that's something that while you're an F1, whether you're doing on-campus, CPT, OPT, the answer is none of that is sponsorship. sponsorship only refers to that other list of visa classifications that I showed on the previous screen. However, if you're looking for, let's say, a job at Google, our favorite example employer, and you're really hoping that you're applying for an OPT job, and then you're hoping to get your STEM extension, and then you're really hoping to stay there for the rest of your life, well, do you need sponsorship? Well, yes, eventually you will. So there's no right or wrong. And like I said, if you have any sort of worries, you can always go to your international student office, and also your career services office will also usually be able to help with these types of questions. Fourth tip is, if you are interviewing or speaking at a career fair or something like that, we always encourage students, before you say, I'm an international student, is to focus on selling yourself and selling your skills, and using the fact that you have gone through this education, right, in the United States, or your prior experience. Is first, you're selling yourself, right? This is a job interview. You're looking for fit. They're looking for the best possible person to hire for that particular job. So focus on selling your skills and your experiences before you talk about your immigration status. With that being said, timing and honesty is everything. Unfortunately, we have had many students who wait till they're in a meeting with the human resources to sign employment paperwork, and they have not told anyone that they're an F-1 student. And at some point, your employer will find out. You will have to show proof of work authorization. You will have to show your paperwork in order to get hired. And typically, it's not appreciated by employers to hold your immigration status back until the very, very end. So at some point, you will want to talk about it and be honest about it. So if it ends up coming up in the first interview, it comes up in the first interview, and that's okay. But just, you want to first sell yourself, but you also want to be honest. And please note, there are some employers who will not hire international students for sponsorship, and that is perfectly legal. Employers do have the right to not sponsor students for work visas, or sponsor people for work visas. So you do want to do your research, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But I do want to go back to the very first tip, right? It is going to be your responsibility. If you get that dream job or that dream internship, if they say CPT, I don't know what CPT is. Well, because you've done your research, because you're confident, and you know exactly what the process is, you'll be able to help them, because they will not know. There are some companies who do this all the time, and then there will be some companies who've never heard of it before, and it will be your responsibility to be knowledgeable and confident about the process. One really great resource that has been developed here at UC Berkeley is the U.S. Employer's Guide to Hiring UC Berkeley Students. It is targeted mainly toward degree-seeking students, but I think it does have a lot of information there for all types of F-1 students as well. So that's always something that you can show to an employer, or use it to help your employer through the process. So how do you do your research? So there's many resources out there, but if you are looking for international student-friendly companies, or you're looking ahead toward the future and you're trying to figure out, well, what types of employers, or what employers will be willing to, say, sponsor me for an H-1B, there are numerous websites. I've listed just 3 here on the screen that will list companies that are willing to hire international students, as well as companies who have previously sponsored students for H-1B. The sponsorship for H-1B is actually a public thing, so you can actually look this up and see, for example, what companies have hired how many people on different visas throughout the years. It doesn't mean that they'll hire you. It doesn't mean that they'll continue to hire sponsor H-1Bs, for example, but it is a good indicator of which companies are knowledgeable about the process and which aren't. So that concludes our formal presentation. And we are now ready and open for you to ask your questions. We are happy to answer as much as we can. We might also have to refer you to different places, but feel free to type your questions into the Q&A and we'll be happy to answer what we can.
Allow me to start. First of all, I would like to clarify the OPT session. Yes, all students who are eligible to apply will receive a link to the Zoom session, and the correct date is, yes, March 31st. It's a Wednesday, and we will start at 11 a.m. So I highly recommend to be on time because the presentation won't repeat. You, of course, welcome to stay and ask questions, but it's good to know the basic. The questions about how CPT is different from OPT and also the minimum credits. So you have to complete at least one academic year, which is 2 semesters to be eligible for CPT. So it's not a number of credits because it depends on the program you're enrolled in. So you need to be enrolled in a certificate program and you need to complete 2 semesters. And then, so the difference is that on CPT, you are still enrolled in the program, and on and the internship program will help you, with the placement and, preparing your resume and cover letter and help you with like how to do interviews. When on OPT, you do it on your own. You're responsible to find your own company, and also mainly, of course, that it requires the US CIS authorization, which is Citizens and Immigration Services. And there is a filing fee that is payable to the Department of Homeland Security. Please, feel free to let me know if I answered your question. Thank you.
Now we've got one question. Does extension allow on-campus jobs? So yes, if you are a student with UC Berkeley Extension, an F-1 student, you are actually able to apply for on-campus jobs, both at the UC Berkeley Extension campus, as well as on the UC Berkeley main campus. So it is allowed. And as Olga mentioned, you actually built into your F-1 status is the ability to work on campus, maximum 20 hours a week while you're in classes. Something to note, right, is that on-campus jobs, depending on which school you go to, can be very competitive. A lot of students want to work on campus while they're students. And there is, depending on the type of school, if it is a public school, there are preferences given to US citizens. And it's not because they're citizens, but because they have applied for something called federal aid, so financial aid. And so that usually there's preference for students who are awarded federal financial aid. And unfortunately, international students are not eligible for that. But there are many, many students who do work on campus, and mostly campus jobs are working in the dining halls, working in the gym, at the library, working in offices and things like that. Kevin, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, certainly. So is STEM OPT applicable for extension programs? The answer is yes, under certain circumstances. If you were to complete an OPT at a prior school but did not use your STEM extension and were to successfully complete at least 1 year of study with us and complete a certificate, we would be able to assist you with a STEM extension using that extension that you did not use at your previous institution.
And to add on to that, if you are only pursuing a certificate program with UC Berkeley extension, certificate programs do not qualify for the STEM extension. But if you do have something prior in the US, then we'd be happy to help you with that process. Here's one. The question is, when you have enrolled for a full-time program for 1 year, can you take internships between those 2 semesters, given that your F-1 visa is for a longer period? So I'm just trying to make sure I understand that question. So I'm going to answer this in 2 ways. So in order to be eligible for CPT and OPT, right? And like we talked about, CPT is more the internship while you're studying, and OPT is more the job after you graduate. You do have to have been enrolled for 1 year, and then you're eligible to apply for one of those work authorizations. And essentially, you can only do CPT if you're still a student, so before you graduate. So if you take, for example, it depends on when you start, and it really also depends on your school. We here at UC Berkeley Extension and Berkeley Global function on a semester basis. There are also many schools who work on a quarter basis. So the timing of when you're eligible for what will differ based on the type of calendar that your school is on. So if you are, for example, in a 4-year program, so you're pursuing a bachelor's degree as an example, you could apply and say you start in the fall, so that's in August, and then you enroll full-time in the fall, and you enroll full-time in the spring. So that's, you've completed 1 academic year, and you are intending to continue with the rest of your degree for 3 more years. You can apply for an internship or for CPT after your first full year. So I want to clarify that your visa is not necessarily, the visa is just what's in your passport, and that allows you to travel. What really determines your status in the United States is your enrollment status. So are you a full-time student? Are you a continuing student? Are you, graduating, or are you new? Things like that. That's really what controls what you're allowed to do, not necessarily what your visa is in your passport, but what your academic program is.
So what is the best time to apply for CPT? Okay, so when you apply for the internship program and you have a job offer, yes, you can apply for CPT. We have a form to complete that will be signed by the internship staff, most likely Luis, and then we'll process your CPT authorization on the I20. So you can show it to the employer, and if you need to get a social security number, you will take it to the social security office. So it's just, it's a very, very quick process. It doesn't require these 90+ days when you apply for OPT. So yeah, just as soon as you have a job offer, but CPT dates will be the same as your internship program. So it's not flexible, okay? So it depends on the semester or summer term. Yeah, that's important.
Thank you. And our next question is the STEM extension once in a lifetime, or does it apply per degree? For example, bachelor's versus master's. Currently, the STEM extension is actually available twice per lifetime. And it does require one to go from degree to a higher degree. So for example, bachelor to master to PhD, etc. The nice thing about OPT for students who have plans to pursue their academics in the United States for a long period of time, you can apply for OPT once per degree level. So in this example, say you come to the United States and you pursue a bachelor's degree, an undergraduate, you can apply for 1 year of OPT after your bachelor's. And then you go back to school and pursue a master's in the United States. Well, then once you complete your master's, you'll have another year of OPT and then go on to PhD, then you get another year. So OPT is granted per degree level as long as you're moving in a sequential manner. And the STEM extension is available twice per lifetime. Our next question, Kevin, do you want to take it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you apply for your F-1 visa from another country, say India, when to apply and will the process be lengthy and can a student get a visa easily? That's a really great question. And what I would recommend is to look at the local US embassy or consulate at which you would like to apply for your F-1 visa and check out their visa wait time to get a sense of how long it might take to get an F-1 visa. Now, it is true, it can take some time for students to receive visas. So if you are thinking about applying for a program, we recommend to apply early so that you can obtain your Form I-20 and then go through the process of applying for your F-1 visa.
Thanks, Kevin. Olga, would you like to take the next one?
What sort of support does extension provide while doing OPT? Well, we will prepare you for the OPT application. Definitely will help you with all the documents and make sure that you completed your application correctly, and we'll give you the information about where to mail and how, and if there are any updates from the USCIS regarding the OPT. But generally, like if you're referring to the career advising, then at the moment we don't provide it particular for the OPT. If you are enrolled in the internship program prior to getting an OPT authorization, then definitely you will have tons of advising, you know, on how to get a job and how to, you know, do the interview. But right, so but would definitely help you with the OPT application for sure.
Thanks, Olga. Our next question, is it mandatory to take the professional internship program for CPT? So I believe this probably comes from either a prospective or current Berkeley Global student. So currently our policies for CPT, and like I mentioned, each school may have a different way of going about this, but we do require that students are enrolled in the internship program in order to obtain CPT. The reason for that is CPT is the F-1 rules has to be an integral part of your academic program. And what that means for us is that it is essentially part of your academic program. We take a lot of care in making sure that all of our students' internship opportunities are comprehensive, and that you're not just going out there and working. You're going out there working, gaining experience, being able to reflect on that experience, and really maximizing how much you learn from it. And that to us is what a good practical training experience really is. So for UC Berkeley Extension, Berkeley Global, we do require that you're enrolled in the internship program to qualify for CPT. However, if you're going to a different schools will have different policies surrounding CPT. It is actually one of the, CPT is very vague in some ways in how the government manages it. And so there's a lot of differences amongst schools. So make sure to ask your international student office for sort of what the rules are there. Kevin, would you like to take the next?
Yeah, sure. So the question is, when do we receive the I-20 from UC Berkeley after we filled out our application and receive our admittance? That's a really great question. So generally speaking, it can take about 3 to 4 weeks to receive your admission into one of our programs. And then usually a week after you're admitted, or within a week after you're admitted, you should receive your Form I-20 via FedEx. After you've submitted an application, you will see if you are admitted a FedEx tracking number within your extension student profile. That way you can track the progress of your Form I-20 as it travels to you.
Thank you, Kevin. The next question is, what are some examples of the illegal questions potential employers are not allowed to ask during the process? That's a really great question. You're not, as an employer, you're not allowed to ask actually about citizenship. So you are allowed, basically the only things you're allowed to ask are those 2 questions that we posted earlier in the presentation. Do you have authorization to work? So they're not allowed to ask you if you're a citizen or anything like that. They're just supposed to ask you, do you have authorization? And then, do you need sponsorship? So those are pretty much the only 2 legal questions that they can ask about you, like your background, that's not related to your work experience and skills. There might be some exceptions. So if the job itself does require you to be a US citizen or permanent resident or something like that, then they can ask you that. But most jobs don't. Olga, would you like to take the next one?
Yes. So you're in the US. To get a social security number, you need to have a job offer. And we have already covered like 3 types, right? So while on F-1 status. So if you have a job offer from on campus, from a department on campus, you can get the social security number. If you have an authorization for CPT, you can get the social security number because so the social security number, the main purpose is that you can earn money in the US and you will pay taxes, right? So yes, you will be able to get a social security number. And when you apply for OPT, if you don't have a social security number by then you will also be applying for a social security number. So when you get your job authorization, you already have a social security to work and be paid. Yeah. Thank you for this question.
Thanks, Olga. Kevin, would you like to take the next?
Sure. So the question is, when can we enter the US, as in how long before the program begins? If you are a new student admitted to a program in the US, you can enter the US up to 30 days before your program start date. And usually you can find your program start date listed on your Form I-20. So if you've obtained your F-1 visa and you have your Form I-20, then yes, 30 days before your program start date is when you can enter the US.
Thanks, Kevin. The next question is, can CPT be a paid job or only unpaid? Great question. You would have to check with your school because there are some schools that have very strict policies surrounding this, but generally CPT as written in the immigration regulations can be paid or unpaid. It's more likely that a school will require that you get CPT for paid, and there's a little bit more flexibility on unpaid. And what I mean by that is, so if you are, you're going to go work for an accounting firm and they're going to pay you for the summer, right? Whether it is you get paid hourly, whether you get paid a stipend, whether you're getting housing or meals or any sort of something that is worth money, right? It doesn't actually have to be just a paycheck. That is considered a paid job, and you are absolutely required to have work authorization. So if it's off campus and you're still a student, that would be CPT. So if, for example, it is a volunteer internship where no one is getting paid, then there might be some flexibility. And we do recommend that you talk to your DSO, your International Student Office, about the particulars of that. But I think anything that gets paid, you absolutely 100% need authorization prior to beginning work. And I think that's something that's very important in any type of F-1 work authorization, is you have to get your authorization before you begin your work. Olga, would you like to take the next?
Yes, thank you, Mariana. So the next question is, when the U.S. Embassy gives the F-1 visa, what is the ideology behind determining the number of years? This is a brilliant question. It's, generally, from our practice, what we see, even though our programs can be just for one semester, we have students who come here, let's say, just to take a fall program or a spring program, or they sometimes study just for 8 months, doing like one certificate program and then internship, or they study for 12 months and apply for OPT. Usually a visa is granted for 5 years. It can be also for 3 years. It depends on the country, on the current political situation. So it's something that schools are unable to control. But in general, I would say it's from 3 to 5 years. It doesn't mean that you can stay in the US for the duration of your visa validity. Please be very clear on that. When you enter the US, we will explain to you the difference between the length of your visa and program of studies. So you have to follow the length of the program that is listed on your I-20. And on the I-20, you will have the dates of the program. So basically, your visa is granted, let's say, for 5 years, but your program is only 1 year. So that's how long you can study. Plus, you will have a grace period of 60 days. And as Kevin mentioned, you can enter the US up to 30 days before the program starts. And if you finish your program and you decide that you're done with your studies, you completed your OPT and the grace period, you have to leave the country, even though your F-1 visa can be still valid at that time. So please be aware of this. So it's a little complex, that's for this short presentation, but yeah, there is a difference between visa and duration of stay. And the more information, again, you can find on the study in the States, so please feel free to email International Extension Office, and we'll be happy to go into more details.
Thanks, Olga. And I think we've got maybe time for one more before we close. There's one more question. So regarding the I-20, is it school specific? Should I file as soon as I get admitted to a school instead of waiting notification from all schools that I've applied? That's a really good question. So the I-20, the Form I-20 is the document, it's 3 pages, that your school will give you after you are admitted. So is it school specific? Yes, it is school specific. It is program specific. And like Olga just mentioned, it printed on the I-20 will have your start date, the start of classes, your anticipated end date, your major, and other sorts of information. So you do want to make sure that you've kind of made a decision before you go ahead and apply for your visa. So that, you know, and you can definitely ask your school for advice about that if needed. So before we close for the day, I want to thank all of you for joining us. I hope that this has been helpful. Being an F1 student is great and wonderful, and we cannot wait to have you come to the United States, whether it's with us at Extension or with another school. But as you can tell, it's quite complex. There's a lot of different facets. And we just want to make sure that you know your resources, that you know that you will always have someone to ask questions to. And the job of any international student office in the United States is to help you, is to help explain these things and re-explain these things over and over until you are confident. And so we thank you for your attendance and your really wonderful questions. And we hope to see you. And if we don't, we wish you the best of luck. But thank you.
A big thank you again to Vanina, Olga, and Kevin for their great insights into how F1 students can maximize their training and employment benefits. And thank you to all. Thank you again to all of our attendees that were on the call today. We have a great lineup of events that are wrapping up the week, including one on maximizing LinkedIn later this afternoon, actually. All meant to support you in your career advancement. If you haven't already, check out the remaining Berkeley Global Career events on the UC Berkeley Extension website. We look forward to seeing you there. And we would also appreciate it if you could please take a minute to give us your feedback on today's events. We'll put the survey link in the chat, and we'll be emailing it to you as well. So thank you panelists, thank you everyone.